All right, in this video, we're going to take a look at just an approach for constructive response that Heidi and I have kind of been researching and trying to create for our students. What we've heard from the graphic organizer approach is that some of the items are just not feasible due to the requirements for some of the constructive response questions, and sometimes there are more or less actions than the point value of the question is. So, for example, if there are 3 specific items that they need to complete, but it's only a 2-point question, for example. So those are a couple of the reasons we decided to take a look into this a little bit further. Our approach, our goals of our approach: 1, we want to increase the confidence in students to answer the constructive response questions. 2, for us, we want the more points for the questions, so to increase their scores. 3, we want the approach to work for all constructive response questions across all grade levels, so some consistency there. 4, simple method that students can remember. And 5, the approach is the same for 2- and 4-point questions, again, pointing back to the consistency. So I'm going to show an example, and then Heidi's going to show an example here in a second. So for a 2-point question, this is a 5th grade test question, and I just highlighted the actual question from the document rather than the pictures and things that went along with it. Thought that would get the idea across. So the first thing that we would ask students to do is basically, what are the verbs in the question? So once they are identified, we want them to just underline the verbs and label them appropriately 1 and 2, for example. So fairly simple, just underline the verbs 1 and 2 in this case. Next, they would say, okay, in this case, one of the verbs is draw. Draw what? The second verb is use. Use what? So you kind of add that what question after the end of each verb. So continue with that. If you say draw what, in this case, we would say an obtuse angle. So the question is draw an obtuse angle. So we would underline the what part of it, which is the obtuse angle, twice, and then the use, we are going to use a protractor. There's a little bit more to the second question, protractor, to give the measure of the angle, for example there. So our 2 questions, we're going to have draw an obtuse angle. Again, underline the verb once, the associated whatever is associated with that verb twice, use, so on and so forth. And then after they do that, whoops, let me go back real quick. Students should answer those questions, obviously. So once they figure out the question, they need to answer it. And then students should check their work after they answer it. Any incorrect thinking, any math errors. Did I answer all the questions that were required to answer? So, all right, and now we have Heidi's going to show an example of a reading question.
Now we'll take a look at a 6th grade constructed response sample. Again, this is a 2-point, and what you'll see first is that the question for this particular passage, it asks or says, describe 2 characteristics of the Solaire that qualify it as a green building. Write your answer in the answer document for 2 points. So first you find and underline the verbs, which we've found describe and qualify, and then number those verbs in order. So describe, first describe, and then even though this doesn't tell us what to do, this is sort of part of the description, but we've asked them to underline the verbs, so we'll go ahead and do that. So describe and qualify are things that we're thinking about with this particular question. And then next, we're going to have to determine what to do with those actions. So describe what? And we're describing characteristics of the Solaire. And we're going to underline that information twice. So describe characteristics of the Solaire, and that qualify what? Well, qualify it as a green building. So we're trying to determine what characteristics qualify it as a green building. And we've underlined both of those qualifiers twice. And again, this is really getting students to focus in on information. It's getting them to look at the question repeated times, multiple times, so that they can really think about what they need to put down on that. Instead of just reading it once and saying, I don't get it, we're breaking it down for them so that they can really start to look at the parts. Next, we're going to place check mark above any number that indicates how many are needed in the response. In this case, they're looking for 2 characteristics. So the number 2 needs to have a check mark above it. And that way it gets us focusing in on how many characteristics. Describe 2 characteristics, check mark above that. So again, we're really trying to break it down for the student so the student can break it down to really focus in and concentrate on what needs to be done to get the full points on this particular question. And now we know the verbs, describe and qualify. We've numbered them. We know the descriptors, characteristics of the Solaire, and then as a green building. And then we know we're looking for 2. So we're looking for 2 characteristics. So now we can go ahead and answer the question. And the response that I put down here is that the Solaire is qualified as a green building because, and I picked 3 things even though we only needed 2. That way I'm sure that I've got at least 2 of the right answers, because it uses solar power, it cuts water by reusing it, and it has lights that automatically turn off when people leave the room. So those are 3 characteristics of the Solaire that help qualify it as a green building. And that's how you approach a 2-point question.